Whoa. Once you've seen the three-breasted Maja I diabolically created in Photoshop, it's hard to say which is weirder, with or without the extra gland. You got it. The title of this video is a double entendre, or as the French would say, a double entendre. I've committed a cruel abomination on an old master, and I've exposed that his own masterpiece was also an unintended bit of a cruel abomination itself.
Starbuck, I'm telling you, there's something just not right about this place.
Rest easy, folks. Don't get excited or angry. I'm not shooting down the greats for my own self-glorification. I'm pointing out that while they may have been immortalized, they weren't immortals. Like you and me, they struggled with anatomy, perspective, lighting, and all those elements that it's impossible to get down perfectly. But like them, with enough persistence, we too might be able to achieve something worthy of hanging on a wall. Further, to err is human, and the great artists become easier to relate to when we realize they had vulnerabilities and sometimes cruelly botched their subject's anatomy. My mockery is designed to highlight a few cringe-worthy mistakes the great Goya made in this infamous painting. I'm a huge fan of the old masters and think it's a tragedy that they aren't being taught more. In my grad school, we spent precisely 0 seconds on art created prior to Duchamp, unless it was to deride it. The most obvious issue is the real estate between her breasts. One is burdened by gravity, and the other is floating in weightlessness. You could fit a third breast in there with room to spare, which explains the extra breast in my version. I hope you caught all my changes so I don't ruin it for you. Think of it as a challenge. Here's some interesting facts about this painting. First off, there was a model, and I gather he paid a lot of attention to her lower half, which is much more persuasive to my eye. There's speculation about whether it was his mistress, a prominent duchess, or a composite of different women. The word Maja, according to Wikipedia in the title, denotes a female Spaniard issuing from the lower classes. The painting belonged to the private cabinet of nudes owned by a prime minister, where it remained until the Spanish Inquisition discovered it, along with his other questionable paintings. Keep in mind, the prime minister found this painting erotic. Apparently, the Prime Minister of Spain, and that's just one of his many titles, was not the only one to find the Maja not only flawless, but eminently alluring. Perhaps my favorite art critic, Robert Hughes, agrees with the Prime Minister. What makes Robert Hughes a great art critic is, mostly, that he has the huevos rancheros to tell you when something sucks. But sometimes, and this would be an instance, he takes huevos rancheros in the wrong direction. And here he is, in a minute of his most cringeworthy.
I've often thought what my feelings about the subject are. They are, of course, naturally of admiration for the formal qualities of the painting, but in reality they are of unmodulated lust. What I would really like to do, were it possible, and alas, neither time nor the guards of the Prado would permit it, would be to hop in there like a bee getting into a peony and have a wonderful afternoon. I just wish there was a little bit more pink on the right nipple.
Goya managed to escape being prosecuted by the Inquisition by stating that his painting was in the tradition of a Velázquez depiction of Venus and works by Titian. Not particularly visually literate, and their minds encumbered by viciousness, the Inquisitors couldn't see through the ruse. And here are the remaining outstanding abominations that afflict our Maja. She has no neck, and because of that, her upper torso is oddly extended. You may say, well, at that particular angle, you wouldn't see her neck. And that's why you try to find a pose that doesn't have awkwardness built into it. Her head is just placed there, and I fear her face is also mostly on the left side of her head. He's also lighting her from the feet, which is already a little unusual, but it has the effect that the tops of her breasts are getting shading. They're in shade, and I only discovered this when trying to reproduce the third breast in Photoshop. So her upper chest is gray. It's a little odd. And then there's the hand. Okay, yeah, I took some real liberties in only giving her 3 fingers, but how inflated is her pinky? And the whole palm seems long, and the base of the thumb looks misplaced. Her hair seems to obscure what would be a perfectly sublime shoulder, unless you imagine pushing back the hair, in which case. Compare this painting, if you will, to Titian's Danae of 250 years prior. I mean, the point is, Titian had a model, he could get the breasts where they belong and the lighting, so it wasn't just because Goya didn't have the kind of access to models that contemporaries have. Danae has a lot of neck, and her breasts belong to the laws of physics with which we are more intimately familiar. Her face even tilts in the same direction as her head. She's also lit from a low angle, but her chest isn't gray. Her pinky doesn't look like it was dug out of the ground. Goya is a great artist, but just between you and me, and this is top secret stuff, he's not a virtuoso on par with someone like Velázquez or Titian. It's his unflinching depictions of the horror of war and his facility with etching that make him an unforgettable and great artist. I'm not even sure we want his work around dismembered bodies to be any more realistic than they already are. So, if you carefully look at some of my own work and you suddenly notice some grievous error, remember, my dear Inquisitors, that I am working in the tradition of Goya.
Parsley, sage, rosemary,